Welcome to this Discovery series with SolarWinds. I'm head geek Leon Adato, and with me today is Technical Content Manager of Community, Kevin Sparenberg.
Hello.
Hello again.
Hi again.
Okay, so when cloud first came out, when it was just new, how did IT folks actually start using it?
They wanted to move tons of stuff to it because of elastic compute, which basically means I don't have to worry about resource constraint. I don't have to plan the stuff. I need 28 gigs of memory 50 times and tons of, just put them all up there. It's fine.
Exactly, the good old lift and shift. And you know what's wrong with lift and shift?
Everything. Everything is wrong with lift and shift. Lift and shift is the thing of last resort given no other options.
Yeah, it was never a good idea, but it seemed like a good idea when people didn't understand what they were getting themselves into.
It's very similar to the way PDV was, though, 5-10 years ago.
Except that with PDV, you were paying for it regardless, so you tended not to get yourself into $15,000 accidental problems. Yes. But the reality is that lift and shift is a problem because most VMs are over-provisioned, underutilized, not well understood in terms of workloads. And I don't think that that is necessarily the devs or IT sysadmins' problem.
No.
Tools frequently don't show you that kind of operating spec because once you've bought the equipment, it's sunk cost. Yeah. It's just there. It's running, and that's fine until it stops running, until it crashes. But when you move it wholesale to the cloud, all of a sudden you're paying for it by the minute, by the megabyte, by the whatever, and now all of a sudden there's a dollar value. And really what I think we should talk about here is how do people conceptualize what the on-premises equipment is doing for quote-unquote free. Yeah. Again, sunk cost, depreciating assets, all that. But it's doing it, and it's doing it fine. But when I move it to this pay-as-you-go environment, what does that actually mean to me? So there's a statistic.
Okay.
I want to use. The statistic, if 45% of organizations that lift and shift to the cloud without optimizing first will be over-provisioned by up to 55%.
Ouch.
And they're going to overspend by 70% in the first 18 months. And I think folks who are listening to this, I think managers who are listening to this are like, oh, that's why I got that $15,000 charge that first, right.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense because when you build it, we had this discussion before, if I build a server and I'm a sysadmin and someone says, what do you need for specs? You say, I need all the specs. Because there's a very real chance you will never be able to get more specs.
Yes.
But right-sizing virtual infrastructure is incredibly important before you even think about moving it through an IaaS or PaaS. When you move that to cloud, that is a whole different thing because if I don't need 56 gigs of RAM, I only need 22 gigs of RAM. Right. Guess what? I should build something for 22 because if I have 56 and don't use it, there's a discrepancy in billing involved, and that's going to come back to haunt me.
Right. It's the flip side of the way that we used to think as sysadmins, is that I want to figure out the minimum requirement. It's going to expand to take it. And I think if you're into buzzwords or you're trying to sell this, trying to tell a good story, forget about sales. Nobody wants to be in sales. If you want to tell a really heroic story in your organization, instead of lift and shift, maybe call it improve before we move.
Yeah. Because that's what you need to do. Because the cloud, although there's infinite, compute available to you, there are smarter ways to do things that you weren't able to do internally. I mean, some of the things, if we talk about this simple solution, I've got a 6 web server cluster, but it only gets hit once a quarter really, really hard. But I need 6 servers. But that's one machine with Elastic. Yeah. And you're done. And then when it's not needed, it falls back. These are the discussions you need to have. But it's part of it is you have to have these discussions and people need to be honest. The departments need to be honest. Do you really need this? When do you need it? Why do you need it? And you also have to have the numbers. You as the IT, the monitoring professional, need to have those numbers going in saying, this is what you said you needed. This is what you're actually using. That's
the piece, right there. I think that a lot of, especially devs, but even the sysadmins, set it, forget it, run. It's got the specs it's got, and it runs and whatever, and it doesn't bother me. I don't get alerts about it. I don't get any messages. It never turns red, so I'm okay with it. But that piece, the know that it's only getting hit, it only runs hot once a quarter at month-end closing, at the sale times of year, whatever the system is, right? You have to know that. So the first thing is you have to have something that's going to baseline your existing on-premises, virtualized or physical systems to say, this is their operating parameters. right?
There's two parts to it. There's the one where you have to inventory what you already have there, the baselining.
Sure.
Inventory what you have there, what's being used, whether or not you have the right number of CPUs, the right amount of memory. The other side of that is when you want to do a cloud migration to this, you need to understand where you're going to be in a year or in 2 years from now. So being able to actually take those baselines, at, the point in time baselines, and actually look at them historically and saying, in 1 year, if I do no ads,
right.
if I add no VMs and I just keep here, what's that going to look like in 18 months? Being able to produce that and say, this is how much compute you're going to be using, this is how much memory you're going to be using.
Right.
You can actually take two of those things together, and that's what you need to. That needs to be the source of truth for your discussions.
Yes, and I'll also say that what a lot of tools will do is they'll take, current operating statistics and just do a straight line deviation, right? They're just going to take all the data and they say, well, you're generally trending up, and therefore you're going to be here. Like, no, that's not how it works, because it's Tuesday and we run hot on Tuesdays, but not on Wednesday and Thursday or whatever. So the baseline has to really do some, analysis. There has to be some real algorithmic machine learning.
And that statistical level stuff is beyond me to be able to do myself. I need a tool to do that for me because I am rubbish at statistics. And I have zero problem seeing that.
Right. And once you have that and you understand it, then you can make your move. So I think it's worth saying, what does that look like?
So if we talk about the inventory side first, what we have here is a list of things that are under-allocated vCPUs, which is rare. Most people, I know that where I came from was very stingy. They were like, oh, you asked for 8, you're getting 4.
And prove that you need more.
And prove that you need more, which is fine. The other time, it depends on who's making the request. Sometimes it goes the other way. But really the ones that I find incredibly interesting are things like VMs that might benefit from decreasing vCPUs. Because CPU co-stop is a problem, and people don't realize it. So being able to pull this information out, and then knowing where you're, I call them orphaned or zombie VMs, the ones that are sitting there and not doing anything. Yeah, and being able to are you really using this? No, and having one click to be like, would you like to kill it? Sure, let's get rid of it. Great. And this is the first part about your kind of inventory control. Make sure I know what I'm looking at, and make sure I know what it is from the compute level, the CPU and memory, and then also what it is as far as storage. Like, are you using snapshots? And there are valid reasons to use snapshots, not as backups, but there are valid reasons to use snapshots. But do you have a ton of snapshots? Do you need to have all these snapshots? If I have, I don't know, a ton of them on a cluster, maybe I can get rid of several of them, like kill an entire tree and delete them out, and without actually having to go into another tool. So being able to see it from reporting and then take action on it. So if we want to look at future, we can actually look at the capacity planning. So this is what's it look like today? What's it going to look like in a year? What's it going to look like in 2 years based on what I have and how I want to build that up? And what I love about that is we'll take storage into account. So vSAN cluster, ESX capacity, one we've built out for one of our user groups to show this live. And being able to actually see this stuff and see what it's going to look like in a year if we add a number of VMs, and then back that up with actual data.
Right.
And say it's going to go up this much CPU, it's going to go up this much memory using current trending information.
Right. And I think also the reality is that when something is improved and moved, not lifted and shifted, when it's moved into the cloud, its operating parameters are going to be different. But at least you have somewhere to start and say, this is how I'm going to make my estimates, and then we're going to go from there.
Yes.
It's also worth mentioning that all the cloud providers are trying to find that halfway point. It's not Earth and it's not cloud, it's fog?
Yes. There's something in that region.
Right. So there's Azure Stack. There's AWS Outpost.
Yep.
And even VMware at VMworld this year announced that they were making improvements to the cloud automation services.
Okay.
Right? So that there's this way of on-prem having a cloudy type environment to see how it's operating, to get those statistics before you hit the big red button and make the Skybeam laser thing to push it to the cloud. So you have some options to be able to not just pick up that app and learn as you go and have that 18-month 70% over subscription.
Yeah, let's not have that if we can avoid it.
Really? Okay, so I think this gives at least an idea of how to avoid that lift and shift mentality. There's also some white papers. We have a guerrilla guide on this as well as other topics. And finally, stay tuned for more Discovery Series videos on this and other topics. Thank you for joining us.